I'm sorry, Director Hawes.
All right, all right. All right, so guess we can go ahead and get started. We'll just go ahead and call the meeting to order. We have a couple items on the agenda. We have the Jefferson Modernization Project, and then we have the Roosevelt Grandstand conversation. So I think I will send it over to Dan to get us rolling. If we can do introductions real quick, just so we can know who's all in the room, would be great.
You want to start with Terry?
Start. There you go.
Lydia Neal, Facilities. I'm the Director of Project Management and Construction.
Deanna White, Real Estate and Planning.
Marshall Haskins, Senior Director, Athletics.
Brady Creswell, Senior Director for the Office of School Modernization.
I'm Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
I'm Alina. I'm the Cleveland alternate.
I'm Gisa. I'm both.
Julia Brim Edwards, Board Member and Committee Member.
Drake Shelton, Principal, Jefferson.
Eddie Monk, Board and Committee Member.
Young Lee, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Business and Operations.
Roseanne Powell, Board Manager.
Kara Bradshaw, Executive Assistant.
Okay, is that it?
Got some more. Yeah, you can go back.
Tamara Hickok, Self-Enhancement.
Lorna?
Sweet. Camille Izzetto, Interim Director of Innovation and Black Student Excellence.
Mark Howard, Assistant Superintendent of Secondary Schools and Multiple Pathways Graduation.
Keisha Walker, Jefferson Project Manager.
Steve Price, Jefferson Project Manager.
Natasha Garcia, Project Manager, Office of Operations. Diana Horn, Jefferson Project Manager.
Kirsten Howden, Real Estate Manager.
Scott Johnson, Consultant Project Management. Richard Hunter, Co-Chair for Jefferson Dairy.
Allison Adams, VP of Modernization for Jefferson.
Lorna Esposito, Senior Director for Jefferson and Harris.
The last person.
All right, so we'll go ahead and take it away. We have two topics tonight. One's the Jefferson High School modernization, a status update, and then we're going to talk about Roosevelt High School grandstands as well. The first topic,
Hey Dan,
materials. I'm sorry.
should we find out who's online, who's virtual? Like I see Lucy. Well, I'm Director Green. I'm a committee member, or committee person and board member. But I'm thinking about the iPhone and Jonathan.
Yeah, sorry, I'm the Franklin representative, but I had to join virtually. I'm Liz.
And Jonathan, I think you're last.
Hi there, Jonathan Garcia, Chief of Staff.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, no, thank you. So we'll jump into the Jefferson modernization update. There is a staff report and a draft resolution that are part of the materials, and Rena Cresswell is going to give just a quick summary of the staff report, and then we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Dan. So I'm going to just go through it kind of quickly, summarize what's in the staff report, and start with a little bit of background. Back in late June, we had 100% SD estimates come in for the Jefferson Modernization Project that were substantially over our funding. We followed that with a value engineering workshop. We continued to do some work to look at how we could get those costs down to within our funding or our budget. We determined that the only chance we had to stay within our budget was if we changed our assumption of staying on site with students during the construction to relocating students and staff during construction. That was a fairly significant change, and we certainly heard from the community a lot of concern about that change. In particular, most recently we had a meeting with SEI, thank you for representing SEI today, that brought back some numbers and some content about interest in relocating, which was 91% folks said they did not want to relocate, and 97% of them wanted a different design altogether. So where we are today is we have continued to move forward with the design in order to understand if there was a possibility for us to really truly get it back down to the budget. That was something that we needed to do to work through all the details. At the same time, if we wanted to stay on the schedule that we had promised, we had to keep going with some of our land use work. So we continued to do that. What we've determined over the last week or so, as we continue to crunch numbers, is that we actually are not able to get our budget down to what we need it to be without a significant amount of work that would likely make substantial changes to the program of the school, given the tight timeline of the schedule as well and those land use decisions, given the community concerns about the design and about the relocation. We are recommending that the project pause the current design, that we stop designing what we are currently designing. We take a step back and reevaluate what we are doing with the design of the project. That reevaluation should include a significant amount of broad community engagement. It should include additional due diligence about other construction options, including the things that have come up in the community conversations, such as demolishing the 1909 structure. It would allow us time to also look at other things that we might want to appeal with the city, other impacts such as setbacks. It would allow us time to have more substantial conversations with Portland Community College about opportunities with the Mellon College Partnership. It would also allow us time to really look holistically at how the Center for Black Student Excellence, Jefferson High School, Harriet Tubman Middle School could actually work together within the community to really look at what that means towards the design of those spaces, how they work together, potentially work actually in the same building. We'd like to look at all those options. We'd like to have conversations with the community about what those opportunities are. We'd like to do some creative thinking. And this is an opportunity for us to do it. One of the challenges that we had when we started with Jefferson is that we were so far ahead of the work that was being done for CBSE and for Tubman as well. With the pause in the design, we have an opportunity now to start fresh, to really take that and look at it in new light, really bring some fresh eyes to it. So that is essentially what we're recommending, is that we stop the current design, but we continue forward with community engagement. We continue forward with having these conversations about what is involved with these projects, how they work together, and what that means for the community as a whole.
Drake, did you want to make some comments as well, or do you want to wait till later?
No, I can go now if that's okay.
That's great.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. I wanted to come and speak because obviously thank you for inviting me to the meeting. There's been parent communication that I've had, community folks that have also reached out to me, and I thought it was important before this resolution went through that I give voice to those that I have spoken to. The work that's been done since the SEI meeting. And really just talk it through. Growing up here, being from Portland, those things, I have a lot of connections to folks within the community. I think what Marina said is definitely something that I definitely agree with, that we need to get more community input and figure out kind of the next steps behind that. It was definitely evident in the reaction of the community way back in August when we made this announcement. And it was a blunder, I'll just say, for PPS, and I'm part of that. Why not including the necessary folks in it that needed to be included? Since that time, people have reached out to me, both parents and community members, just trying to ask, what's the update on Jeff? What's the update on Jeff? And so I had a semi-informal meeting with some members of the community and some parents that really, and one of them sent a letter, and he told me to state his name, and this Kanan Chapman, who sent that email, and I think I forwarded it to most people here who have it. But folks are fearful that if we send the message out to the community that we are pausing the project on a school that already needs some boost in enrollment, we will further that complication in doing that. We all agree that the move to Marshall is a nix. That is not something that we need to be doing. And we heard that from the community. But we also all agree that the community has also voted in a way because we have one of the lowest enrollments in PPS of the high schools. And with this information that comes out, me as the principal, I'll use the word scared, that our community will continue to vote and not send students to Jeff. We've gotten emails from parents since then asking us about the movement. I actually met with a parent yesterday, who wanted to talk to me about her kids have been through Jeff, graduated, but she had some younger ones coming through. And the impact is definitely not to move to Marshall, but it's a hard sell to get her kids to want to come to Jeff because they have the options of going to either Grant, Roosevelt, or McDaniel. If you look at the enrollments of Grant, Roosevelt, and McDaniel, they're over, they're busting out because the students that we were supposed to catch we're not catching. And I wanted to state that in this meeting as we talk about the redesign, because the messaging to our community needs to be of that we want to still move forward with a new model. I've also been talking to Joel Anderson and the Anderson team because we kind of broke down 4 variables that need to happen in order for this to happen. The first one will be students stay on campus. The second one being a schedule that stays on time, that families can look forward to, looking for a new build of Jeff. The third one is the scale and scope, and the fourth one is the budget, which Marina brought up. In talking to the architects and the other construction folks that I've been, again, conversations, one of the things I want to say too before I get to that is that when Anderson got the bid, they also reached out to local vendors of color in our community, and $4.9 million was going to go back into our community based on this project of the vendors that were going to be able to come in and be part of this. So now what happens with that? So there's a ripple effect that comes with the pause, and one that impacts our community maybe more than what we can the unintended consequences. Again, I'll state that Marshall is not the option, but the architects and construction folks, and you guys know the better words than I'm saying, said that they have a plan to do the 4 things that I just named. Keep students on campus and continue the project. Keep it on schedule for opening in 2027. The scale and scope is that of the design, and to keep it on budget. What they're asking is that they can present it to this group at some point. And I don't know the answers to those things, so I'm throwing those out there. But I want to do as much as I can and swing and punch to make sure that I'm going down with a fight, because I feel like if we pause this, there's going to be some unintended consequences that come, and enrollment is the biggest one that I'm thinking about. With the strike, and we know pending cuts are going to happen, I think about my staff. I think about, again, our community and our school, what the school needs, the programming that we need, the things that go forward. We have a PE class right now with 7 kids. I saw your eyes, right? That's low. and we need more kids in our school. And I think that this message and how we communicate this message is big. And I agree with everything Marina's saying about the pause and the redesign and the construction, but we also need a message to the community that is coming forward and is going to continue. Because again, the messaging that I'm getting from families, from community is that if we say pause and stop, we're going to continue to have the exodus of people going to Roosevelt, McDaniel, and Grant, all great schools, but Jefferson's a great school too. And I want kids to experience that. That's it.
Drake, really quick, this is Jonathan. I just want to make sure I understood. Chris, Kanan Chapman is the community member you represented?
Kanan Chapman, yeah, he's a parent. He's a Jefferson parent and also works for Anderson, yes.
Yeah, he's the business manager for Anderson,
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Got it, thank you.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. I think that those voices needs to be heard as well. Those voices that, don't necessarily always get voices, being able to express that to us. I have a issue with us being able to do all the things and at the same time listening to our community, where was very clear at the SEI meeting of what they wanted to happen. They talked about potentially tearing down the 1909 building. They talked about rebuilding a new school in its entirety. And so I worry that those are 4 things that you spoke about. How do we do all of that at the same time? Right.
Can I answer that?
Oh, sure.
Give them a shot. And I think that's the presentation. Give them a shot to answer those 4 things that they can keep kids on campus while also doing those other things. And then if it's a no, then it's a no. Then it's a no.
Well, do those their presentation, do it reflect what the community said over when we was at SEI as far as tearing down the old building, building the new building, and getting on time, being on time and being under budget? I'm just want to make sure I'm clear. So you're saying their proposal addresses all of those things?
Yes. The budget being the major one, and keeping kids on campus, because that's the goal.
And providing a new school.
Right.
I'd like to step in for just a minute because I appreciate that Anderson is very eager for the project to move forward. Our architects are as well. We have spent months going through this. They have been at the table, dozens of them, and this is not where we are today. What they have shared with me as their proposal requires things that we are not able to do just yet. So I think that we are going to continue to have those conversations, but there is no proposal on the table from them as of this morning that gets us where we need to go. It does require that we tear down the 1909 building. There are other things that will come into play with that in terms of how it gets laid out. It would require redesign. That all takes time. That does not mean they hand us a proposal and we start today and we are ready to move kids out or move wherever they go. No, we actually have to spend the time to redesign it and to go back through all of the permitting. So I don't think that what they are proposing as an option for design and potentially budget is inconsistent with our desire to pause. What we're asking to pause is the current design. We would like to look at other design options, and there are a number of things we're going to have to do to figure out if they're viable. We do believe that looking at other design options will allow us to get to budget, but it is going to take time. It is not something that today's the day and we're going to just keep going and it's all going to stay on schedule with the schedule that we have and the budget that we have.
And then my response is basically, how are we communicating that to the community, to our feeders, to making sure that folks still elect to come to Jeff. And that's my biggest thing, is the enrollment at Jeff and looking at the numbers of kids that 8th grade forecasted so far that we have. And we're missing the boat right now. And I just want to I'm saying that out loud, that I'm scared about that.
I'm gonna let Director Green go. Go ahead, Director Green, and I'm gonna say what I gotta say.
Thank you, Kylie. I'm on grandchild duty, but I had to take this meeting. Since we're saying that we heard the community, and that we are going to do a pause so that we can look at the redesign and all the other pieces. I'm also feeling the fear from some community members because we don't have the best history of always doing exactly what we said we were going to do in times past. And so and I know that we keep telling the community and that a lot of things are changing and to bear with us. And I want to continue to say that. I also want to try to figure out, what does it hurt us if we're still going to be pausing and we're going to be in an exploration stage? What does it hurt us to sit down with them and say, okay, what is these ideas, these 4 ideas or whatever it is that you said you had, you didn't share them with us earlier. I don't think we should say it like that. You didn't share it with us earlier. However, as of today, I wasn't aware that you had a plan, or you had a concept. You had something that could get us here, and we want to see what that is. I'm trying to figure out, what does it hurt us to have that meeting or have that conversation? And then if it's trash, then we say, y'all knew this was trash. Why'd y'all bring this to us? And we throw it right out the door, and we keep doing what we were already going to be doing, which is pause and establish a plan to go forward. But I'm just trying to figure out, what is it going to hurt us to sit down with some more people? Some of those people are community members. I know Mr. Chapman works for Anderson now, but before he worked for them, he was a strong advocate for our community. His kids went to Franklin. And so I have a huge respect for him. And so if he's telling me that, Pastor Herman, I think we got an idea, I want to give him the opportunity to shoot his shot. And I've never blocked somebody that tall, but if I get a chance, I'll knock it down. If not, then he gotta make that shot. But what does it hurt is all I guess I'm trying to say is, y'all see my grandson behind me? He ruled the world. He get to do whatever he want to do, even interrupt meetings. I'm sorry. But that's all I'm gotta say. Now I'm gonna turn my camera back off so I can send my grandson back out quietly. Thank you guys for putting up with me. Just 1 second, Judah. All right.
So I'm gonna concur with Director Green. Even with the fact that there could be a potential proposal on the table, it still would need our staff would still need to have a recommendation of at least pausing, so we can at least hear out those other recommendations as well. Because without the direction to pause, then they keep going based on the direction we gave them earlier. And so the pause piece, I think, is a necessary thing we need to do, just so we can start entertaining any other idea, thoughts, processes, goals, and a reassessment for how we do Jeff. But I am in total agreement with Director Green when we talk about the history of PPS, the history of being told one thing and then doing something else. And I think with our piece here, I have a few questions. With this pause, my question is, what do the timeline look at with this pause? That can be for Dan, Marina.
It's a good question. And the challenge is that we really need to spend meaningful time listening to the community. And meaningful time does not mean 2 months. It probably doesn't mean 3 months, right? I think.
So is that a year?
I don't think it's a year, but I think some of it has to come out of what we hear.
So what
I do think that there need to be conversations, but those conversations have to lead us down a road.
So what else would you need to hear that you haven't already heard?
Honestly, I think what we need to have is a conversation about how CBSE, Jefferson, and Tubman actually work together. And we need to have a conversation about what that means for the scope of what we're building.
Well, I get that, but my understanding is, unless we're talking about building Tubman onto the Jeff site, which that has already been, the staff absolutely said no to that already. Why would we be entertaining something like that when we already have potential movement already with Tubman and the like?
So one of the things that has been brought up multiple times over the last 4 years is the decision of whether Jefferson should be built for 1,700 students or not. And we went forward using an education specification for a comprehensive neighborhood high school, which is target 1,700 enrollment. We have between 500 and 600 students in Jefferson. And the question then becomes, where are all the rest of those students going to be coming from? That question has come up with the community. We have heard people concerned about gentrification.
And I get that, but I guess,
we've heard that concern about the size. So if
go ahead. Sorry, I can't see you, so I don't know when you're not talking.
Okay, apologies. So the question is, if we had a smaller size, and I don't mean 600, there's a vast range between 600 and 1,700. If we targeted a smaller size of enrollment, does that leave room to then look at including Tubman program, including CBSE program, including some components of those programs? I think that it could actually send us in a different direction that might be very valuable. And it's not just saying, hey, we're going to plunk down a neighborhood high school, and now we've got these other things we have to fit in these other places. I think we really need to look at how this all works together. And we need to think about how the activities, the things that we do, and the way that we do it integrate out of those three things, or don't integrate, but have a conversation that could then lead to a change in what we design.
So my only question is, if that was the case, why didn't we have those conversations earlier? And then I still go back to, what is the new timeline? If we're trying to do all of that, and I'm gonna be honest that if that timeline pushes Jeff back behind any other school, I don't know if we have enough board support for that. And so that means we would literally have to make sure Jeff is moving before any other high school is done. And so I just want to make sure that it's clear that, when we're talking about redoing this whole piece, that is clear, and also know that I just don't know what else we need to hear from the community. What else are we looking to hear from the community around the modernization or the rebuild of Jeff versus, unless you're talking about adding those other programs to the existing building or existing land that Jeff is going to be on. And from what I heard, that was not feasibility because of athletics and the programs that we have. So I guess what I don't want to do is have all this stuff have to start from scratch to get back to where we're at now with, we're going to rebuild Jeff, and all that stuff, and just take more time from a community that has already been waiting a long time.
Gary, I know you can't see us, but this is Julia. So just some thoughts I have. So when I got on the board in 2001, it was right after the reconstitution of Jeff had happened. So pretty traumatic event for the Jefferson community. And then following that, because of No Child Left Behind, there was the dividing the school into the School of Champions and what was the other half of the school?
School of Pride.
School of Pride. Thank
Young
you.
Men's Academy,
I knew
Young
that somebody
Women's
else had been
Academy.
around. And then the decision in later on to like not have it have a neighborhood boundary. So, you know, I think the issue of like distrust of the fact that we could be waiting forever, or we're promised something and then we're not going to get it, is real. So I think this issue of having, to Director Hollins's point, of having a timeline that that the community can count on, and I think the answer. I thought the board answered the question of where the student's going to come from when we voted at Jefferson. I don't know, last year when we said there's going to be Jefferson is going to be given a neighborhood boundary, which is the thing that the disadvantage Jefferson has is like every student who goes to Jeff has chosen Jeff. It's not true at most of our other high schools. Most of our other high schools is like you live here, that's the high school you go to. But so Jeff, they're there by choice, and part of the where are they going to come from? It's their Jefferson would have an actual neighborhood boundary, and so I thought that the board answered that question of where the students are going to come from. From my perspective, I would say I would rather call it pivot versus a pause, and that may be a semantics, but I think a pause implies, you know, we don't know when it's going to restart, versus I think there's new information and like that requires a new direction, but pause makes it sound like the work is stopping. And if I were a community member, I'd be pretty concerned with that terminology. So from my perspective, I think about it. So we have new information from the community, and I look at I really like the 4 sort of frames that you created. Is with new information and acknowledging that things take time with like absorbing the new information. You know, can we still can we provide an updated schedule? Like, can we, you know, share that we're committed to having students still stay on site, and then sort of work through these so the community can still see like we're working within a framework, and it's not just pause, but they're going to, you know, at a certain point we're gonna move ahead. So to me, that is a different way to frame it than it's pause, because I am concerned that we don't ever get off the pause. And Gary, one of the things I would say about, I do think there needs to be clarity on whether there's going to be something else on site, because you can't, I don't see how we could design a new Jefferson in whatever shape it is, and then 6 months later say, and we want to add X major component to it. So I would say during this sort of pivot, it has to be, is it going to be just Jefferson on site, or are there going to be these other components, and resolve that, because otherwise I don't think we'll ever get out of the design phase, and I don't think we'll ever be within budget. So those are just some thoughts I would have, but we're really trying to pick out if we have to pivot, we have a new design, we need to listen to the community, get some essential questions answered, but how do we, as soon as possible, get on a schedule that produces the school that we've promised the community and within the budget that we have. So those are just my thoughts.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I don't care what you call it. I don't care you call it a pivot, pause, continuation. I just want to see what the action is. and this is the first time I'm even hearing, as much as I've been on the board, as far as actually looking at this as a way of adding Tubman to that site or any other variation of that. And then maybe those conversations happened before I got on the board. But once I was on the board, when we was talking about the resitting of Tubman, it was very clear that putting Tubman on Jefferson was a no. Dan, Marina, everyone said that was not an option. And so it's really, maybe I'm just perplexed right now to see like how come all of a sudden now that is an option when it hasn't been, at least that was my time on the board. And I think if we start looking at those type of options again, then now you're going to delay this project even longer versus looking at what was just said at the community meeting, which was they want to keep kids on site. They want to have a new building, and they was okay with tearing down the old one and moving in that direction versus trying to wipe the slate clean and figure out something totally different. The fact that we didn't do this with the CBRC stuff in the beginning, we already know how that turned out, which it wasn't good at all. But I think we're on a path, and Jonathan can correct me if I'm wrong, we're already on a path to sitting Tubman already. I mean, unless that has changed, that would be new information to me. So if we already have a direction that we're going with the sitting of Tubman, I don't know what else we would need to talk about or discuss when it comes to Jefferson, other than keeping the kids on site, building the new Jeff, and then tearing down the old building.
Chair Hollins, I think that's correct. We do have a sitting. I understood Marina's statement as an example of some of the questions that could be lingering in the community. So particularly to the question about why didn't we think about ask the question about 1,700 or less students. The reality is over the years that question has come up multiple times, and multiple times staff has been told that we have to build it to 1,700. And so, the question still lingers, will we, if we build to 1,700, will they come? I have full confidence that we get close to it, but there's the question, there's still just that lingering question of, can we build to, let's say, 1,300 instead of 1,700? And does that give you more room to do other things? I think with the additional shift to tearing down the 1909 building, I think also gives us more opportunity because, now you're working with a different dimension, if you will. So I think I don't want to get caught up in the, does Tubman go there or not? I think there's the broader discussion about, do we build for 1,700 or not?
And I think that's Jonathan. Hold on. I think thank you for that, Jonathan. But ever since I've been on the board, it was always recommended to us as board members to build to 1,700.
Period.
And so
yes, this current iteration. Sorry.
Yeah. So this is the first time it has been told that we told them what to do. From ever since I've been on the board, it's been the district, and I have the recommendations that we build to 1,700. So for me, that was always the number we built to. And if we are going to build to 1,700, which I think we should, because if we make it a neighborhood school, right? If we can make it a neighborhood school with the choice options, well, then now you have the option to get to 1,700 with the overflow from Roosevelt, Franklin, or Grant. And so,
I
go ahead.
And I'll lift up what Director Brett Merritt said. I think enrollment balancing is one component of that. I mean, and I think you're right. You're under your, in your tenure, in Director Green's tenure, that the shift of 1,700 has not. That's been the recommendation, partly because we have an ed specs that says 1,700, which was approved, developed and approved ultimately by the board years ago, right? And so this is the challenge with the continuation of boards. You know, the previous boards decisions impact ultimately your decisions down the road.
No, absolutely, and I haven't heard any of our board members, you know, past or present, since I've been on the board, want to bring it down from 1,700. I haven't heard that with our board members.
Right, and that's the firm, and that's what we've continued to hear. Hence, why we built it for 17. But again, the question still, you know, is a question that we need to answer, which is the school is 600. We're building it for 1,700. Do we have enough, given the enrollment decline? Do we have now in the next 20, 30 years enough to fill that school? And I don't know the answer to that. So, you know, I think, but that's the question on the table.
Can we just stop for a second? This is asinine.
Yeah.
I'm a member of Jefferson Community. I'm a graduate. You guys have screwed us for 50 blinking years. And to sit here in this meeting, you decided it was 1750. You decided there was going to be a neighborhood school. Why are we even talking about that anymore? This is, I mean, you wonder why we don't have kids there. It's these meetings.
Yes.
Because when you sit in a meeting and go, oh, well, it's 600, you made it 600. When it was bigger, you made it smaller. When it was 3,000, you made it smaller to build other schools. You built Adams to make it smaller. And now you sit here saying they don't have the enrollment. You did this. You did it, not the community. You did it. And you want to talk about the community's opinion about Jefferson? It's in rooms like this. When you build a neighborhood school and you say you're going to that school, I was at Wells. It wasn't. Everybody at Wells, go to somewhere else. Maybe you get a better education. Let's make it 3 smaller schools. Let's go. No, you said it's your neighborhood school. You go there. Grant has 20, Grant's 1750 has over 2,200 kids. Don't ask me where the kids are coming from. Have the courage to stand up for what you said you were going to do, which is 1750, make it a neighborhood school. We're not having a conversation if they have enough kids. We're doing that. You're continuing to promote the doubt in the ability for Jefferson to function as a high school. Either say you don't want it or get behind it and make it happen. Period. There's no other discussions about that. I mean, just have the courage to say, we are building it, it'll be what it'll be. To sit here to hear you say, oh, well, maybe it could be some of the other things. Some people can, I don't think anyone in the community told you to change it from 1750 to make it something smaller. No one is advocating that. But we spent an hour talking about that. There's an option to say, hey, can we look at what are the possibilities from the community? Back a year ago when you said the community was speaking, clearly the community couldn't speak because you didn't go ask them. Now you've asked them what they wanted and you're talking about, well, we don't know. They told you. So can we just listen to them? It's simple. It's not that hard. This is unbelievable that we continue to go through. And for the record, I'm speaking as a Jefferson community member and a graduate because I have a whole different opinion as the PPS board, PPS employee about how we continue to treat Jefferson different than we treated every other school. Every single time we come to a discussion, the rules change. The marker changes. You know, every single time. And I don't understand why when we continue to profess, we're about equity. We're about fairness. We're about kids of color. You continue to put them in situations where you know they can't have success because when you made it 600, you ensured they couldn't have what every other kid in Portland Public Schools had. Because you told me the number was 1350 was the minimum to have a quality high school so kids get all the experiences. And then you made it 600. Now we're sitting there going, oh, maybe we can do it again. No, don't do that to us again. If you're not going to treat us equitably and let us be a regular school, then close it, because this is asinine.
I'm speaking.
I don't know who you were saying you to. I don't know who you were directing that to, Marshall. But
I'm saying
if
to
it was to
everybody
me,
that's PPS to have a voice of the say in what happens to Jefferson. That's what I'm speaking.
right? Okay, including your leadership, right, and all of our collective leadership.
I have a I don't have any way, shape, form, or fashion think that Jeff should be built less than what we have built all of our other schools to. Roosevelt was told the same thing, that you're not going to be able to meet the numbers. They said they did a PSU study, and according to the PSU study, that Roosevelt wasn't going to make the numbers, so that's why they built it to 1350. And then they had a little section off to the side where they will be able to come back in a later bond, and should the numbers go up, then they will be able to build on the, I want to say it's the east side of the property, over where the cafeteria used to be at. They left space where they would be able to build a new facility or a new building there to help Roosevelt get to the numbers. And within 2 years after the school was built, Roosevelt was already hitting the numbers that they said that they weren't going to get to. There's no part of me that believes that Jefferson, given the opportunity, would have a problem meeting the numbers. So I don't believe that there's going to be, I believe that that's a wasted conversation. If we're talking about really wasting time, that is a wasted conversation to say we want to go back to the community and say, hey, could you guys entertain a school less than what we've given to all the other schools? I would say if we didn't have that same conversation with Lincoln, then why are we having that conversation with the Jefferson community? If we don't plan on having that conversation with Cleveland and Wilson or whoever else is next, then why are we having that with Jeff? I would also like to go further and say that part of our communication that goes out is that we're not doing any other school until Jeff is done. I don't care how long it takes. We're not doing any other schools until Jeff is done. Cleveland, Wilson, whomever else is next, nobody gets to get up to bat until we get done with this Jeff project. I assure you, if that is the line that we take, the line that we draw in the sand, I assure you that there will be some pep in the step to get Jeff done, because those other communities aren't going to want to continue to sit and wait while we're trying to figure out what we're going to do with Jeff. So my thought is nothing happens until Jeff happens. Nothing gets done until Jeff happens, period. And we definitely need to build it to the specs that we have built and designed every other high school for, because we're not living in a scarcity mindset. Oh, the numbers are down. The numbers will go back up. They always do. There's a dip and then they come back. So we can't build to where we're at now. We build to where we're going because the school is supposed to last 100 years. And there's nobody in this community that's going to feel like we need to even entertain that conversation. So I kick that back.
Yeah. And so, hold on, Dan. I see you. Joy speak. So, and I think, if we want to have a focused conversation, right, around the modernization piece, and I can't remember what meeting it was when this had came up, and it was made very clear that we do 1,700. I think if we want to have a focused conversation, we continue on the path that we was already going, that it's going to be 1,700. Because I think that's one of the things that we told voters when we went out for the bond, that we were going to build these schools based on our educational specs. And so I think, like I said, in order for us to have a focused conversation, I think the conversation should literally just be about those issues that was brought up with the community, being on campus, building a new school, tearing down the old one. And if we have to address the budget piece, and I think that's something that I have questions on, because we budgeted, I don't know if it was $300-something million or whatever that is. I'm just curious on what would be the overrun cost if we still have that same pot of money. When I remember hearing before that tearing down the building would actually save us money. So those are some of the questions that I think this continuation or this pivot, we can start getting answers to those questions as well. But I don't think we start a whole brand new conversation versus the capacity that we're going to build to, if we're going to be adding, another school on top of it. I think we don't we don't open up those conversations, because I think those conversations has already passed. So that way we can focus on what we need to focus on. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I know Dan wants to say something. I just want to say one last thing, and then I'll be quiet. I agree 100% with what you said, Gary, Chair Hollins, and Director Green. I also just want to know from staff's perspective, right? I think the challenge, the 1909 project, we were told for years, or the 1909 building, we were told for years that we couldn't tear that down, right? And all of a sudden there was a shift. So I think it's important that as staff, we're going through these different scenarios as we're hearing from community. I think it is important that all those questions help get answered, even if we heard it now loud and clear now. 1700 is the way to go from the board's perspective. Okay, got it, understood, right? But if we don't ask the questions, I think those are all going to be lingering things, and then we're going to find ourselves just back where we just found ourselves now, with the tearing down of the building, right? Because for years we're told, don't tear that down, don't tear it down, and now it's a different shift, basically because we got new information, which is fair. And so I hear what you're saying loud and clear. I agree 100%. And I think I hope there's a little bit of room for staff to bring forward questions and not be seen as they're being, that we're trying to move away or try to take away from something, but it's a questions that we need answered for certainty, given the shifting conversation that's happening in the community, which, as we all know, the community is very dynamic.
100%. Jonathan, thank you for that. So maybe I shouldn't.
Director Green, hold on. Director Green, hold on. I want to hear from Dan.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna keep my hand up.
Okay.
I got one question about cost.
Okay, well let's hear from Dan. He might can answer some of those questions. All right, Dan, you're up.
Mention the Lincoln cost, and you'll answer my cost question.
Okay, let me try, and I'll try to be brief, and I got a couple of those a little over the place, but to answer a couple questions. So one I'll point to in the materials is a draft resolution that is two parts. One, it talks about pausing the design. I agree with Director Green members. Pivot is the better word. I'm probably the one who was the worst as far as using pause, but pivot, because the idea isn't that the project stops. It's that what the feedback we've received and the information we have is the current design isn't likely to work. So we want to pivot and find what that next design is, and so that's what the intent is. It's also, there's the second part of the resolution is about crafting a community engagement plan. And it doesn't have a specific timeline. And I know the question is, well, what is the timeline? And that's a good question. I think part of it is what does that community engagement plan look like? And what do we hear from the community? Does the community coalesce quickly? Does everyone coalesce quickly around one solution? And if that's the case, I think it can go a lot quicker. I'm not familiar with the plan that you talked about earlier. Two things about that is, one, I believe that's a new construction option, so I think that is totally in line with what we are recommending right now, is the way that I read that. Yeah. And two, if that is this great, sort of panacea solution, and we can move fast on it, I don't think anyone's going to say not to do that, especially if everyone we get the feedback that yes, this is the right solution. To some of the questions about and why the staff report is written the way it is, where it says here's some possible considerations, is there has been discussion over the years about Tubman or the center and their physical relation to Jefferson. The reason that, I guess I'll say where we are now, is Jefferson, starting in 2020, had a scope, had a schedule, had a budget. It was a project that was moving forward. It was starting construction in summer of 2024. When their questions came up, or their considerations about adding Tubman to it or adding the center to it, I don't think the language, but I'm not going to remember specifically, was that can't happen. It was, here's the trade-offs. Jefferson no longer can meet its schedule, or Jefferson cannot meet the scope that is in the bond, or Tubman cannot meet that scope because the size doesn't work. So those are the trade-offs, and the direction was Jefferson, keep going. Now that we have this pivot, the logical question is, hey, some of these questions that came up before and had answers, and they were answered because we had this track, should we bring those questions back to the table and ask, is there an opportunity to have these programs have some other connection? If not, that's fine. What we're saying is it germane to have that conversation? So I hope that makes some sense about some of the decisions that were made in the past and the conversations about trade-offs. I swear I had another thing, but I've lost it. And I think the only other thing maybe that before trying to remember the other one was the timing is as soon as possible. And if this isn't a stop, pause was probably not the best language, but it is this pivot, it is find that new design, it is get community input on it, but then go as fast as we can. And I'll stop there.
Can I add something before Director Green goes? I think it's huge though that I think either Hollins or Green once just said that in the messaging that we have to the community, no other school goes though until we get done. And I think that's going to be huge. And again, I started this all about enrollment and looking at Jefferson and the size. And I think that will give the community an assurance that this is going to get done. Because right now they're saying, oh, we're off of it. Now we're going to move to somewhere else. Cleveland's going to be up, then Ida B. Wells. And then by that time, what's Jeff going to look like? So I think exactly what you just said and along with what they're recommending, I think will be great for our community to hear.
Director Green.
Hi, Director Green. Your hand is up again.
It's perpetually up.
It sure is. Okay, I'm gonna put it down because I'm talking. So I keep hearing the talk about budget, and that I know we had said something at one point that we were going to reframe using value engineering, because what that says to the community is that we're going to give you pay less shoes and tell you that it's that they're Nikes or something else. And so the community doesn't like that. My concern is that we're building Jefferson with a budget that's far less than what we built Lincoln for. And I know Lincoln had extra permits. They were downtown and they had some other stuff, a few other things that Jefferson doesn't have. But I want to make sure that we're spending we're putting the same amount of dollars into the historically Black school that we did for our PWI. And so I'm looking to hear how we came up to the budget. Did we do the budget based on the programming that we want to make sure that we're able to do in the school, or how do we come here? Because the last thing I want to do is value engineer the predominantly Black, historically Black school and give them something substantially less than what we gave to Lincoln. And I'm using Lincoln as the model because everybody knows how I feel about what we did to my other historically Black school, Roosevelt. And I don't think y'all gave us a Lincoln. And I want to make sure that my other school doesn't get what my last school got. I want Jeff should be the monument. It should be the thing that because we're a school, a district that says we're valuing it, they should be able to go to that Black school. That's, I believe that all the Black students will come back. If you build it, they will come. And I believe they'll come back, and that when they get in that school, everybody will be in awe of, you built this for us, and that it's amazing. Not value engineering. I don't like the term. I don't like less than. And then we're going to turn around and spend more money on Cleveland. We're going to turn around and spend more money on Wilson. And then we're going to act like that wasn't something. I don't think that's how the community, or at least my community. I don't know about everybody else's community, but the people that stopped me and Fred Myers are going to take issue with that. So.
All right. So go ahead, Dan.
Dr. Hollins, it seems like we should have staff respond to the dollar amounts, because the value engineering was, I think when it came in, 200 million over the projected bond costs. That's when the value engineering came in. It was to get it down, and I believe the amount of money in the bond for Jefferson and the 2020 bond was what,
311 was the initial number, and we added an additional 55 million to that number already,
which is
so
about
now at
100 million
366
more than Lincoln. Yeah.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that we don't leave this room thinking, because when we put the number in the 2020 bond, we wanted to make sure that we could, we had a number that was adequate to build a school for 1,700 students with some of the things that the community had called out that they wanted, which was the larger auditorium and some other things that are very unique to the Jefferson experience. But the reference to value engineering is when it became a $500 million project, and that was essentially to keep the students on site and build a new school. So I hope people don't feel like the budget was not at all to give Jefferson less than. It was to give them, I think, the same, and something built to ed specs that would hold the 1,700 students that we said, the board has consistently said, was the number that we wanted for Jefferson.
And in fact, it's not just for the 1,700 student ed spec, but what we called ed spec plus, which is to say that there were unique program elements for Jefferson that we wanted to ensure that we maintained in the modernization, which was a larger than normally specified auditorium, because the dance program is so integral to the history and culture of Jeff. And so dance studios, the larger auditorium, larger gym, there were a number of elements that we said, okay, we're actually looking at more than what we would normally do under the ed spec. And in fact, the size in square footage for Jefferson for the comprehensive plan was significantly more than square footage for the other modernized schools.
I support more than.
Okay, so I have a suggestion. When we're talking about the resolution, I would love to see a timeline on that. The reason why I say that is because if we're talking about going back to the community and getting doing another community outreach plan, I'd rather have something to take to them versus trying to have them start from scratch. There's no sense for us starting all the way back over when we can start with, say, for instance, what would a new design look like on the north side, and then with tearing down the 1909 building. I think we come up with a design that way versus, starting all over again from square one. A lot of that stuff we've already done. So I think if we can, as a suggestion, if we can come up with a timeline to start from where we're at versus starting all the way over, I think that would be more beneficial to the district and to our community. That shows that, we're not trying to start all the way over, but we're going to start where we're at, because a lot of those things, a lot of those questions has already been answered. The 1,700 has already been answered. The resetting of Harriet Tubman Middle School has already been answered. So I think if we just start there, then I think we can start moving this timeline. And also, as the owner of the project, we can have the design team do it in a timely fashion that we need. We're the owners of the project, and so if we can't get that done, then we might have to look at different vendors to get the stuff done that we want done. I don't want to say that, well, we have to wait another 2 months or 5 months to have another community outreach when it's going to come back to the same thing that we're already at, where the community already said that they wanted to be. And so that's just my suggestion, that we start from where we're at with the recommendations and with the recommendations that the community has already communicated, and the same recommendations that we've already heard today. And so I would love to see a timeline of this and what that would look like. And then how that timeline relates to the other schools that we're looking at building, along with the bond funding, because if we have to, use additional monies from another bond, well, then we need to know how all that stuff works together moving forward.
Can I just have the purpose of the resolution is because you have something that's already been approved by the board, and in order to change direction, you need the board to
yes,
to change the direction.
Effectively. the comp plan that's for the board is scope, schedule, and budget. Go and do this and come back if there's some sort of major deviation.
Is it possible, to Director Hollins's point, to have that resolution indicate that, again, the rebuild or the new build is moving ahead, not with the current design, and that you'll come back at a date certain with a date certain of a direction, like the new direction for the board to approve? Is it, just one thing, is it possible still to stay on the timeline? Say your essential questions get answered, 1,700 students, there's not a co-location.
We cannot stay on the timeline. That is currently.
So that would be like a year later?
I don't know. And the question comes down to whether and how we get approval to demolish the 1909 building.
So like it's a more external factor, not a.
That is the due diligence that would have to be done. And we don't know how long that takes to get that answer. So we can tell you how long it takes to design something and to construct it. But what we can't tell you is how long it takes us to get an answer on whether we can demolish that building. Because that answer is what tells us what we can design.
So there's this external factor.
Yes.
That impacts the deadline by changing the design. And I'm sorry, who is that again?
That's the city.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good news.
Yeah.
I mean, it is good news because, I mean, I think
we are exploring to
influence that.
Towards that, but the process, we don't know how long that could take. Maybe that takes 2 months. Maybe that takes 6 months. But the difference between 2 months and 6 months over the lifetime of the project can be very different than construction ends 2 months later or 6 months later. Because we're a school, we don't get to just move people in the middle of the school year. So depending on whether it's 2, 3, 4, 6, or 8 months, it could change the occupancy date from one school year to the next school year. So those are things that, you know, we grapple with. And when you ask us to provide a hard timeline, it is outside our control. It doesn't mean that we will go slowly. We will certainly pursue that as quickly as we can, but we cannot identify exactly how long that's going to take.
I wonder if it's possible, say that's the plan, like we get permission to remove it, we have a new school design, it's within the budget, and then it becomes the biggest factor of whether we open on time and can start. It's just the city, and then isolating that, because that gives us the ability, I think, to go to the city and like, we want to stand on this timeline, we want your help to stay on this timeline, and here's what we're operating under, versus assuming we can't impact that.
I think that's all fine. I think we can do all, I mean, I think we can, you know, provide a sample or schedule or something that look like that with assumptions that I think we're hearing today, decisions and assumptions. To Marina's point, I just want to be careful that we're not trying to figure everything out right now. And I'm just going through whatever variable. There's 100 variables, but one is we go through the process, we get approval to demo the 1909 building. That's great. That gets appealed. That then goes to the state. Now we're at, you know, the land use board, like a LUMA? That'd be LUMA, right? So then now it's the state, and they have their own process timeline. So there are going to be some things that are out of our span of control. We're not trying to, you know, say that they're, you know, put up with these roadblocks. We're just trying to be, you know, kind of clear and honest. Like some of these things are going to be somewhat out of our control. But that's fair.
I actually like those kind of roadblocks because they're ones that I think are, I mean, if you had to choose roadblocks, they're manageable, or I think they can't be managed, versus ones that are, like if we were going to the federal government and having to lobby them to
So I think no, so I think what Julia is saying is she has some juice. So that's
I'm not
She
promising
has-
anything, but it's like more like in the
she
realm
has
of things we can
some
control.
Yeah, and if I can say one other thing about just timeline, I think we kind of danced around a little bit. There isn't an option to start construction in summer of 2024 and keeping students on site. So that is why we're saying, this pivot, when you said where it isn't, we're not gonna be able to maintain the current previous schedule.
Say that one more time, Dan.
There isn't an option, I'll let people jump in if I think it's a false statement, that for where the plan was to start construction in summer of 2024, there isn't an option that we can stay on that schedule and keep students on site.
Okay, I have a question. Is there any option, whether it's this year or next year or whenever, that we will be able to keep kids on site and start building? Like, for instance, the Lincoln project.
So I'm gonna jump in and just say that's the goal. That's the goal.
Yes.
That's the goal. And I think that's where we need to work with our architects and designers and engineers to see how do we make that work. And it may not work just given the budget and everything. And I'll just say that out loud too, just knowing it. But that's the work that needs to be done to see how that goes with design. And I think that's why I think the timeline right now will be false to say, because you have to look at budget, you have to look at build, scope of work, I mean, all that stuff, right? And then once you figure out that's the project we go with, that's when the timeline comes out. But I think that's keeping the community, I want to just keep saying that's keeping the community in the know that yes, we're continuing to go, so please don't lose hope to come to Jeff. Like, I want to keep saying that out loud.
I get that, absolutely. And at the same time, from the time that we start pausing this up to this date, has there been any other options to be able to build and keep kids on site?
No, I'll say that out loud. No. If there was one, we would have done it, right?
Right.
Right.
If there are options that we
But
can do, yes.
I heard at the start of this conversation that there was a proposal that could get all that done.
Yes,
That's why we need to have the meeting and let them say what they got to say.
It requires that the 1909 building get demolished. And yes, we have looked at options that would keep students on site if we demolish the 1909 building.
Okay, so to make sure, I want to make sure
That is whether we can demolish it or not. So
got
so we
okay.
know.
Yes, I just want to make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
There is opportunity if we tear down the 1909 building to keep our kids on site while we rebuild a new one. There is an opportunity to do that. If we can tear it down.
And stay on budget. There's those four things. I just want to repeat those four things.
But the budget is the budget stuff can always, we had the same issue with Benson and all that stuff. So I'm not so much worried as much about the budget, which I know we have to worry about it, but there's other avenues we can look at for the budget piece as well. So I was making sure I was understanding that if the 1909 building can get approval to get it torn down, then there is a pathway to keep our kids on site while we build the new building.
Yes.
Okay, so now when I hear that, it seems like the focus should be getting the permission or however we need to get the okay to tear down the 1909 building. It seems like that's where the concentration of effort should start moving.
Yep.
So just so I understand, so a 2024 start, which is what had originally been envisioned, is impossible. But it could be. So assume things work out. A 2025 summer start could still work. Students could be kept on site. And then is that a 2-year project or a?
I don't know. We need time to figure that out. That's why we need to pivot.
So, the schematic that has a new build versus and the tear down. Do you have space on the footprint to do like what you did with Lincoln, which was just the students are in the building until the end of the school year while you're building over here, and then
We have looked at
this
multiple options that would do something like that. Every site is different. There are constraints on the Jefferson site in the same way that there were constraints on the Lincoln site. The constraints on the Lincoln site had implications for what we could put on the site, and the same will happen on Jefferson.
There's codes and everything that we got to go over.
We will have to spend some time really looking in more detail at what that means to understand all of the impacts.
conceptually we think that's possible where you
Yes,
have, like
absolutely.
they're in spring and then the old building and then they
Yes.
move to the new building and then the old building gets demoed.
Yes, absolutely. And there are part of taking the time to look at, as we say, our due diligence, is also looking at things like, can we get exemptions from certain other code requirements? Could it change what we put on the site because our setbacks are different because we got an exemption from the typical setbacks? Those are all things that we want to look into that will have an impact on what we could ultimately design and what the cost of that would be and what we'd end up with.
Chair Hollins, can I, just a process question? I think it's important to have, for the staff to have direction about this resolution for next Tuesday. Because there is a urgency. Yeah, I was just saying, there is a sense of urgency in the board taking a position to pivot. The details of that have to be worked out, all the 4 elements that Drake mentioned. But it feels a little bit unclear whether the resolution should be placed on the agenda for the meeting as early as next Tuesday. And I think that would be helpful to clarify direction.
No, I've already said we can put it on the next Tuesday agenda. I think just making sure that the resolution is saying what we're hearing. I think it's just the main thing. I heard timelines. I've heard, making sure that this is going to be a priority moving forward. But the resolution can be on the agenda on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Well, I can say it can be on there, but this committee has to move it to the board. So I don't want to be speaking for my other colleagues.
Let's move it.
Well, that's one.
Yeah, I guess the question I think that I'm hearing is like, what specifically are we moving? Is it just we're redirecting the project with staff to come back with a new timeline, for a new proposed timeline?
Yeah, let me kind of think out loud for a second. I think the direction will be, one, we want, something in the affirmative of like, don't keep proceeding with this design. We want to keep students on site, during instruction.
Absolutely.
I think some other component, and I also hear, please give us a time certain to come back, which I'm envisioning as some version of a new design plan, schematic that meets those other things and is, largely conforms to the ed specs, is substantially similar to the previous comprehensive plan, something along those lines. Correct me if you think that's wrong. And then I think there's other things that we've discussed here today that were questions coming in today that we might want to capture, such as the target enrollment will be 1,700 students, just like the ed specs state. We're not going to go down a conversation pathway with the community about a combination in this design with the Center for Black Student Excellence, for example, in Jefferson, because those things would take time. So I think what I'm hearing today is don't go down that path, go down just a new design pathway that meets these criteria, 1,700, keep students on site, something else I just said. Does that sound about right.
So, Director Hollins and Green, you were both at the meeting at SEI. I don't want to, I know there's been a lot of conversation about co-location or no co-location, so.
That conversation about co-location is dead. Like,
Yeah, that's a non-starter. We don't even need to go there.
so Dan, can you do this for me? I don't know who wrote the resolution, but if someone can if you can write the resolution with some of the stuff that you're thinking, and then maybe you can go over it before Tuesday's meeting to, make sure it's in capturing, what was said tonight.
Yeah,
And
I think it's fair
following
to do just
Dan,
like an
as we
updated
think
draft.
out loud, thinking out loud, can we be clear in the resolution to something extent that we heard our community, something that validates and values the input from our community at large, something that says to them, to those that are going to be pulling this resolution, to those that may hear it for the first time, something that says this wasn't a decision that we made. This was a decision that the community came, we supported, and as a result, this is what we're doing. Something that acknowledges their input and values them. I don't know if we're supposed to put all that in a resolution, but somehow I want to send a nod to my community that says, I hear you. Thank you for speaking up. And as a result of that, this is what we're doing.
Yeah, we can put something like that in the recital, right, Dan?
I think so. I'm not the resolution expert, but I think
Yeah,
Roseanne is nodding in the affirmative.
In the recitals, and one of the things, wondering if this is a sort of a friendly amendment to the recitals, Director Green, because I think it's important to acknowledge it wasn't just the district randomly decided to move everybody off site because that was more convenient. And there was new information, which I think it is important to recognize that the new information was it would cost, almost twice as much as we're projecting to actually do that, and we didn't actually have the money to do it. So I think as long as it's within the context of, yes, we heard the community, and the community was reacting to new information the district got that would have changed what the community was expecting, and then we listened to them. But I think if it starts with you said you didn't want X, it's missing an important component, which is we got new information and we were having to do something different.
Yeah, that's right now.
Something bad to Jefferson.
Yeah, right now that's in the recital number D. As far as talks about,
I don't have it in front.
Yeah, it speaks to that what you just said as
Okay.
far as why the decision. I mean, what happened. So I think we add on to that and capture what Director Green was saying, and then in the resolution portion, just capture some of the things that were said tonight. Then that's something that we can definitely push to the board meeting on Tuesday. So I'm gonna ask Dan to kind of go over that, send it to me. We can go over it together, and then if it's okay with the rest of the committee to move it to the full board on Tuesday. I haven't heard from Julia or Eddie. Okay, that's two. All right.
I'm good with it too.
All right, we got a unanimous decision to do that. All right. Any other questions, comments around this? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. What time is this?
6:01.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
This is supposed to be an hour-and-a-half meeting, and so I'm gonna try to be true to that. Unless Director Green wants to talk about the Roosevelt piece right now, can we wait till January?
We don't have to do it now, just to respect people's time. We spent a lot of time on Jeff, and I want to appreciate everybody for their input. So
Absolutely. All right. So hearing no other conversations around Jeff, I just want to say thanks to everyone for coming. This is a real contentious conversation around this, and there's a lot of history that goes on with this conversation around Jefferson High School. A lot of that conversation and feelings predates us. So I just want everyone to be mindful that, as we are dealing with this, just know that these are conversations and feelings that has been in decades in the making, with this system that we are in, the system here in Portland, with this racist system that, is Portland. We're changing a lot of that. But I just want everybody to know that that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with that culmination of, racist decisions, policies, procedures, practices that has, inundated us, especially as people of color. And so I just want to applaud everyone for being willing to even pivot on something of this magnitude, because I think it says a lot to the community that, we hear you guys and we're willing to make decisions based on what we heard. And I think that goes a long way in starting to rebuild that trust that has not been over time. So I just want to say thank you, and I appreciate everyone that is leaning into this whole process. All right, with that said, meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you.